Well, are the unemployment numbers for real? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com. Send a question in, and I will get that taken care of for you. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. If you have a situation or a scenario that requires more than a simple email back and forth can take care of, you can always get on my online calendar and book some time, and I'm happy to help you over a phone conference and get you taken care of that way. If you want a second opinion, want to know what are your options, I've been getting a lot of emails about, hey, I'm just about to retire. There's a lot of people retiring right now. You definitely want to know your options and be clear on that. So if you got questions about any of that, easily set up a time. We'll go over it. There's no cost, no obligation. And that's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. You know, one of the things that's so very important, and we talk about this from time to time, when it comes to retirement, that 5 years before you're going to retire is kind of the sweet spot. And you want to make sure that I think there's like 5 steps, if I remember correctly, that I came up with. 5 steps that you've got to take to make sure that there are no surprises, because you still have 5 years. I mean, being set about 10 years out is ideal, but being realistic, most people are going to probably wait or may not even decide to retire until they get closer in, so about 5 years out. And so if you ever have any questions about that, want to talk about what your options are, how you can create income, how you protect your hard-earned money that you've saved all these years. And you can do so right there at prudentmoney.com. And that is what I am here for, to be a resource to you. So that's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. An interesting study came out, and this study actually kind of gives the same results as several other ones about how workers feel about the economy, how workers feel about unemployment. And I went back, so my apologies, but you'll get the idea. My apologies, I don't have the specifics of who did the study, which means I probably shouldn't even bring it up. But you get the idea what I'm trying to say. And basically, this study showed that workers were fearing unemployment more so than any other time in the past 15 years. And that's a pretty long span of time. But yet we hear how strong the job market is. We see the numbers come up. And that's what was interesting to me is this last month, when the unemployment numbers came out, they spooked the markets, making the markets feel like a recession was coming when the numbers weren't that bad. They're not great, but they weren't that bad. And so there's been a lot of other economic data as of late that says, don't worry about the recession, as we go from day to day, from different story to different story. But one thing that's remained consistent is that people are having a tough time with higher prices, having a tough time keeping a job. So what we're seeing in reality is totally different than those unemployment numbers are forecasting and are saying is the case. And I think this is important. I mean, it's always been that way. I've always called the unemployment numbers some of the most manipulated numbers that the government produces. But yet, for decades upon decades, the stock market has followed and reacts to those numbers month in, month out. It's the first Friday of each month at 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can flip on just about any major financial media outlet, and you can see for yourself that the job that the U.S. created, 200 and something thousand jobs for the month of August, let's say, or they lost some jobs. Well, we really haven't seen a loss of jobs in a long time. We're just seeing these pretty weak job numbers, which could be saying that, hey, there's a trend developing here. But it's as politicians get up and tout their success with the adding jobs, and it seems like every president is better than the president before, at least according to their numbers. You get to wondering what is real and what's not real. The bottom line is, I guess, to the defense of the government, how can you get a real accurate job number when you're considering that we have a population of 327 million people? Obviously, all those people are not at an age to where they can take on employment, but you're talking about a lot of people trying to track. I mean, they track like 60,000 families, I believe, to get this number. And then they throw in some estimates. And we all know, we'll talk about that here in a minute, but we all know about those estimates. But what they do is they give out a jobs number, and then that's called the preliminary job employment number. And then on top of that, they wait to the next month, and they revise that number. Then there's about a year later, there are 10 months later, so there's another revision, which is the final job number for the year. And what's interesting is that the market's already reacted. I mean, that's all old news. Any significant news that would have rocked the markets at real time gets pushed to the end, and the markets don't really react unless it's a real severe number. I mean, real severe. But the Fed just put out a report today that the unemployment numbers may not be as good as the government is touting. Not real convenient when you've got elections coming up, but I don't think anybody really pays attention to it. In fact, well, I won't get off into all that. But anyway, Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo economists expect the government's preliminary benchmark revisions, or the employment numbers that were released, will show payroll growth in the year through March was at least 600,000 jobs weaker than currently estimated, about 50,000 a month. This one will get your attention. While J.P. Morgan Chase forecasters see a decline of about 360,000 jobs, Goldman Sachs indicates it could be as large as 1 million. So really nobody's sure what the real number is, because all those numbers are just kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't call them accurate for sure. But like I said, in the government's defense, you gotta chase something. But they have a system set up to where they can double check these numbers, which we'll talk about that here in a second. But a downward revision to employment of more than 501,000 would be the largest in 15 years, and suggests the labor market has been cooling for longer. In other words, these numbers haven't been very good for a while now. We just didn't know it. The government numbers show the economy added 2.9 million jobs in the 12 months through March 2024, or an average of 242,000 per month. That's a fairly strong number, but it doesn't look like it's true. Because to add to all this mystery, you have what's called the birth-death model, which we've talked about, and that's where the government looks out over all the information and says, we estimate that the Department of Labor missed the creation of 245,000 jobs. Well, so if the Department of Labor had a number, and let's say that number was 100,000 jobs, and then they added an estimate to that number of 245,000 jobs, and you took that estimate away, that means that we've actually had a job loss. If you had to add that $245,000 to whatever the real number is of the government to get 100,000 jobs, you take 245,000 jobs away, and then there's your real number, a negative 145,000 jobs. Hope that makes sense. But the bottom line is, all you really need to know is that they estimate, and I never really cared for the word estimate and government figures. I don't know about you, makes me a tad bit skeptical as to what the real number is. And I don't want any politician estimating anything, because it's going to be overestimating, and that's what this report says. With the Bureau of Labor Statistics birth-death model still overstating employment from the new creation of new firms, we think that the underlying pace of monthly job growth is likely less than 100,000 per month. So there you have it. It's quite the mess. And so now, and here's the funny thing about it, is that this is like supposed to be news to the Federal Reserve Board. I'm sure the Federal Reserve Board knows the numbers way ahead of time and what's coming out. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is Bob Brooks. We are up against a break. Stick around. More to come. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Bob Brooks. What is the single most important verse on stewardship? Well, you can find that verse in two books, word for word, Matthew 6:24 and Luke 16:13. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Wow, what a powerful statement. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we talk stewardship and how to stay in a committed, surrendered stewardship relationship with God. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show weekdays at 3 p.m.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Hi, I'm Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times. We're very excited to be a part of Bible School Radio. I hope you will join me Saturday, 10 a.m., for cutting-edge guests and the latest information to help you discern the truth, even the inconvenient truth. We'll help you understand our times and contend for the faith. That's Understanding the Times, Saturday at 10 a.m., right here on Bible School Radio, or anytime at olivetreeviews.org.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Talking about the unemployment numbers and how they are actually going, and this is going to be released, the actual number that they, quote unquote, did come up with, I think on Wednesday. So I really don't see the markets reacting to this, but this is kind of old news, and plus I think the markets it just shows more weakness. When you start showing decline and loss, that's a big number. That's a big, big deal. But this starts to affect, and this is where it gets a little interesting. It starts to affect the decisions of the Federal Reserve Board, as you know, and if you listen to Prudent Money, you've gotten a education along the way on what the Fed does. And they have what's called a dual mandate. Their first mandate is stability of prices, to make sure inflation stays input, make sure that everything is priced and you have stable prices. The other mandate is the unemployment situation in America. So if unemployment ever gets out of control, and we have a lot of people unemployed, and or inflation gets out of whack, they get busy to fix that, and they do so by their main way. They supposedly have several different methods of doing this, but the only really one that we see that's shared with the public or shared in such a way that can be found is the raising or lowering of interest rates. Now, there's a lot of pressure being put on the Fed to lower interest rates in September. I've argued that there's really no reason to lower interest rates. Wall Street could argue now that, hey, the Fed's behind the curve. We've had longer periods of time where employment is a lot weaker, and they should massively cut interest rates. I don't think that they're going to massively do anything. There's always the chance they won't even take any steps towards reducing interest rates in September. But we'll see. When you start mixing in unemployment with the stability of prices, which I would argue as well, there's not the kind of stability that would say, okay, we're out of the woods for the inflation situation. I think inflation's over with, and we're now dealing with cost of living, and that's going to fluctuate in a range of prices. But the bottom line is inflation's never dead. I mean, it can get rekindled in a second. That's why you got to be careful, why the Fed has to be careful about raising interest rates when there's still not complete stability in the market. So we'll keep you posted on all that, and we'll see what happens. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. As I was saying earlier, there's a lot of people, talking to a lot of people who are getting ready to retire or have got retirement in their sights. They're 3 to 5 years away and sending in questions. What do I do? What's these options? You're more than welcome to send those questions in, and I'll get you taken care of. Or we can have a phone call and get you taken care of. And there's no cost or obligation. You can always go to prudentmoney.com, send that question in, and I'll get you taken care of. That's all at the website. So let's talk a little bit about the effect of interest rate cuts on the various interest rates that we pay for consumer goods. The first one is, an interest rate cut that affects mortgage rates. I think we'll see mortgage rates go down, but once again, I don't think that we're going to see this drastic drop of mortgage rates. I think we'll see a 6 to 7% range on interest rates, and that may be kind of where the market is going to keep it. Interest rates on credit cards they could fluctuate a little bit. But if the Fed cuts rates by even half a percent, the situation with interest rates they're so high on credit card balances that a 0.5% wouldn't even move the needle. So, don't get me wrong, movement of interest rates either way, excuse me, can make a difference. I think for them to really move the needle on it for a good situation to occur, they're going to have to get aggressive, and I don't think they're going to do that. I came across an article today about I think that the name of the website was Penny Pinchers, I believe, or Penny Hoarders, and they talked about different ways to save money. One of the things they talked about was the high interest rates in credit cards and how you can get your credit card interest rates lower by getting everything consolidated into a one loan with a payoff with a set payoff. I mean, that's the ideal situation. But you've got to be careful about these types of sites. And you have really two components to it. You have the upfront component, which is a company that collects all the data, then disperses that information amongst all the various companies that were going to loan money, and you'll see if anybody accepts you, how much they'll loan. And don't forget, even though they're showing you really nice interest rates of 6.4% up front, they're going to, if they have the opportunity to say you're a risk and they're going to charge you 25%, they're going to charge you 25%. So they're looking for, a certain particular type of borrower that has a certain credit score, but it's got a lot of credit card debt, and they are probably paying, in the 20s as well. So don't think that you're going to go in there and get a better deal, a whole lot better deal. In fact, what they push is the convenience of one payment, which is tough to argue against. I think that's if you can get your credit cards, if you're dealing with a lot of credit card debt and you can get them put into one loan, a consolidated loan, that's the way to go. And remember, there's lots of companies that will consolidate your debt, and they're not talking about a literal. They're not talking about a scenario where you've got all your debt and they're going to combine it into one note and you're going to pay it off. That's a true debt consolidation loan. The other, you got to be real careful about, because rarely ends up being in your best interest. So they may push the one payment and suggest that because that you can just make one payment, they're going to charge you a higher interest rate, and that may be tempting. And I got to thinking about that. If I were in that situation, would that be tempting? And I think it would be tempting, because it's a real hassle to make a payment every month and get your credit card paid off in a certain amount of time. Plus, if you take it out longer periods of time, that interest rate goes up, which makes sense. So to me, it doesn't make sense to move your debt from point A to point B and pay higher interest just because of a one payment. So you want to be really careful about that. The other thing is that they'll say, listen, that we can tell you what you'll be eligible for, and the credit check, which is called a soft check, will not affect your credit score. So you're looking at that and you go, oh, what do I have to lose to get an offer? So they do a soft check, but before they accept you, they make sure that everything is what you say it is on your app, and they do a hard check, which does count against your credit score. So you always want to be careful about that. And the other thing too is, if you've got a situation where you've went to get approved for credit 3 or 4 times, let's say in a year, that does not look good to potential creditors. They don't want to see that you've had a lot of credit checks just to apply for credit. So bottom line, and the other thing too, let me say this, is that chances are there's a very good chance that the fine print can be a lot more aggressive in a new note versus a old credit card that you've got. And this is one that I write about in my book, Deceptive Money, is that just because you're paying 24% or whatever you're paying today doesn't mean that you'll be paying it next year. As you pay debt off, your numbers start to get better, your options start to get better, and then you start to get offers to roll over your debt for 0% for a certain amount of time. And there's once you start to get options, now obviously once again, opening accounts and credit checks start to raise or lower your credit score. Having said that, if you are making a big dent in all the interest you're paying, that's going to pay for itself, and all that will work itself out on your credit score. But there's absolutely no doubt that this is, to me, one of the biggest problems. I don't know that it's bigger than student loan debt. And in fact, it probably is bigger than student loan debt. Well, the only problem with student loan debt is that if you get into a situation where you are just in a bad shape with debt, it's really almost impossible to have it discharged in bankruptcy court. Whereas credit cards, that's always a possibility if you find yourself in that situation. But I would almost argue at those higher interest rates, and really on your Parent Plus notes loans right now for college education are about 10%, which is big difference between 25 to 30%. Actually, about 24% is the average. But that I think is going to be a huge problem at some point. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you've got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.